Hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Infinite Awe podcast and Google Hangout show. I am your host, Matt Belair, and every week my mission is to bring you the most inspiring, conscious, and empowering teachers, leaders, and thinkers on the planet to help you master your mind, body, and spirit. I am so excited for today's guest. If you've ever wondered how to get the most out of life and live with purpose and passion, you're going to want to grab a pen and paper because we have one of the best coaches on the planet. This man is a self-development wizard. He is an entrepreneur, business coach, international speaker, philanthropist, and the best-selling author of Live It, Achieve Success by Living with Purpose. Welcome to the show, Jairek Robbins. Jairek, how are you, man?
Doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you spending the time with me and my audience. So I first learned about you at Socialite, and I watched you speak, and I was really impressed with your talk because you're extremely genuine, knowledgeable, and it's clear that you're passionate about helping people to live their dreams, and you have a massive toolkit to do so. So I'm extremely excited to get into this.
Yeah, I'm pumped. I have a passion for people. My second job, I like to say my first job, my first adult job, was in a nonprofit, and my focus was helping others. And I was like, wow, like there's a job where you could just help people? How cool. I quickly got to a place where it was interesting, and I was trying to think through it, and I'm like, well, nonprofit's awesome. And I remember I was in the office where I worked, and I looked across the hall, and there was a profit side of the company too. And I'm like, I wonder what they do on that side of the business. And I literally walked across the courtyard, knocked on a door of a friend's office, and was like, what do you guys do? And I really didn't even know. And she happened to be the head of a coaching department, and she had a bunch of coaches that coached people all day. I'm like, well, what's that? And she's like, well, we work one-on-one with them. We help them, really define their goals and help hold them accountable. And she's like, well, you played sports growing up, right? I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, you had a coach? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, these people do it individually for business owners and professionals and people who really want to maximize their game of life. And I was like, wow, that makes sense. I'm like, that's cool. And I remember, I think I was 18 years old, and I asked her, I'm like, can I do it? And she kind of looked at me funny, and she's like, sure, I guess. And she's like, well, there's a certain thing you got to pass and a test you got to take. And, you got to make sure you know the information. And then we got to test you and make sure you're legit. So into the whole process, and I ended up becoming a coach. And I remember it was hard to wrap my mind around at that point. I'd obviously seen it, that it's possible. But to wrap my head around as an 18-year-old kid who's still I was still at university myself studying psychology. And because of all the time I had spent reading books and listening to programs and going to seminars and just being around personal development for so much of my life, my entire life actually, it was a very interesting space that I didn't realize I had acquired a ton of information that was really valuable to other people. And I just thought of it as normal. And so in that position where all of a sudden I realized, wow, I could help people through the nonprofit, which is cool. And it's just service first. And I was like, I could also help people as a coach. Service is still first, except for you can make a really good living on this side. And I was like, well, that's kind of nifty. Like that's neat. You could still be focused 100% on serving others and helping people and actually make a bunch of money doing it as a result of making their life and their business even better than it's ever been. And for some reason in my head, 18 years old, having dreams and wanting to travel the world and do cool shit and have all kinds of great adventures, and realizing at 18, like that's going to be expensive. and looking at my non-for-profit salary and being like, this does not add up to that. And I was like, there's a disconnect in our vision of where I want to be, in my long-term vision and where I am now. And somehow, even if I became the CEO of a nonprofit, it still didn't add up to what I was dreaming of. Right. Now the tricky part, it was always service first. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go quit and become a real estate agent because that'll solve everything. And I was like, no, I had no passion for moving houses. I wasn't into architecture or buildings. And it was like, well, I could become like a personal trainer. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know if that's it. And so I kept going through different options. And this one literally just fit. And it was really exciting. And again, it was based on the fact that it was purely focused on helping other people, while still having the ability to be incredibly lucrative overall.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. And you already had a ton of success, in your, I think, early 20s when I read your bio, and we're the same age now, 31. With all this wealth of knowledge, what made you want to write the book? Like, did you see that there was a hole somewhere that people were missing that you wanted to fill, or what was it that made you want to come out and write your first book?
Hold on one second. There's a crazy beeping sound in the background, and it'll keep going.
I'll be right back.
Oh, and we're back.
It's all good, man. It's what happens on a live show, real life.
What's up, everyone? Sorry about that. So what was interesting about the book was I wanted to write that book years ago. And I actually started writing it when I was 18 because I started to realize, hey, I've got a bunch of knowledge that I've acquired very quickly in life. And just so people know where that came from, my mom and dad were massively into personal development. And so much so that when I was in my mom's belly, she was teaching people how to break bricks with their bare hands and like break your limitations by breaking bricks with your bare hands. And I was literally in her stomach, and she was getting trained and certified and master NLP practitioner. And so I grew up in this stuff, literally. And my mom walked across fire with me in her belly when I was still in there. I think at 3 months old was my first fire walk through within my dad's arms, where he was carrying me and walking across hot coals. Again, breaking through limitations. Amazing. And so literally, I grew up around this stuff. And again, when you're around something all the time, it doesn't necessarily click that it's really valuable to other people because it's what you see all the time everywhere. It's not something that stands out. As I got older and started to venture off into different groups and communities and around different people, I started realizing like, wow, most people don't think about, do their actions actually align with their values? Because most people tell you all the good stuff. Like you say, what's most important to you? They'll tell you God, family, making a difference, being a good person, working hard, all these things. And you're like, oh, wonderful. Now, how do you actually invest the hours of your life every day and every week? Take out a calendar, write down the actual hours of how you invest them, and match it up to what you just told me on that perfect little list in your mind. For most people, that shit doesn't match. Right. And so they tell themselves like family first, and they work all the time. It's like, how is that family? That's not family. Unless you work with your family and like y'all hang out all day and do cool family stuff, that ain't family. And it's a kind of a gut check to be like, oh shit, what I say I really value and how I live doesn't match. What's up? And there's one or two options. Either A, just be real with yourself and be like, hey, at this stage of life with where I'm at, I value work. Deal with it. And be real to the repercussions and what happens if you choose that first. Nothing wrong with it. It's part of life. Or shift your life. Make a decision that says, hey, as much as work's important, I'm going to choose to put my family first. And I'm going to choose to make sure that maybe I find a job that allows me to have more flexibility in my schedule so I can be there with my kids every single day. Maybe I'm going to move to a different country like Costa Rica, where having an hour-and-a-half lunch to go home, have family time, and this quick siesta before coming back is normal. Maybe you reposition yourself so that you can actually be congruent with what you really believe is right in life. Right. And so those thoughts, I didn't realize they were valuable. I didn't realize everyone doesn't think that way. And as that stuff started to unfold, I realized more and more, again, as I ventured out and found more groups and friends and communities to be involved with, that I was like, wow, I could add a lot. And so that book first started when I was 18 because I was like, oh, I'm going to write down everything I could teach the world. I hate to say it, but at 18, I pretty much thought I knew everything. I think it was 18 and a half when I realized I didn't know shit and there was a lot to learn. I don't think it came that fast. I was a little full of myself for a few more years. And so I was like, wow, there's a lot to figure out in life. And that evolution normally comes. You leave the house, you go try it on your own. You think you're going to like take over Earth in 2 years. And 6 months later, you're trying to figure out how to afford food. And you're like, wow, this is a lot trickier than I thought.
Yeah, you get the reality check.
Exactly. So reality kicked me in the face in an awesome way. I was grateful for it. It woke me up and I was like, oh, shoot. And where I was honestly trying to help. But I was 18. I partnered with the Learning Annex and I hosted events in Los Angeles and San Diego called How to Change Your Life in One Night. So I was I had enough guts to think I could change everyone's life in 2 hours. But at the same time, enough of a realization to realize, wow, I need more development myself. I need more life experience. I need to go do more stuff. So for the next 10 years, I took the information I learned and I really went and applied it. I stepped out of a job for a company that I had for 6 years, and I started my own business from the front den of a house. I had 3 part-time jobs at the time while I was working, stuff I didn't necessarily love to do, but stuff that could pay the bills. And while I was doing that, I was using all the mental, emotional, physical pieces I had learned to apply them, to paint the vision I wanted, to inspire myself to action daily, to see what wasn't there right now. I would work really hard and envision what I wanted, look around at my life, living in the front den of a house with curtains as a door and 3 roommates, and be like, wow, this ain't the vision. I am not close to this dream of my head of traveling the world in style and going on vacations and learning how to, snowboarding in the Swiss Alps like you do. And, all this crazy stuff I would have on dream boards was nowhere close to the actual life I was living. But I learned, like, hey, it starts up here. You got to create it in your mind. And I also learned there's a difference between thinking when you achieve something that you're finally going to be fulfilled and happy with your life and actually being fulfilled in the moment. I remember I went to a course for my 23rd, 24th birthday. I forget which one it was. But it was a course taught by a group of monks from East India, and it was all about oneness. And it was really cool. So I spent a week right on my birthday learning how to find true peace and fulfillment by just being. And that's powerful. It totally jacks up your sales for a while, but it's powerful. Because you get really comfortable learning how to just be. And it's like, wow, if I were to die tomorrow, I'm cool with that. Like I'm comfortable with life just as much as comfortable with death. And to find that space as soon as possible will give you immense power in your life. Now from there, the contrast, doing. Have you mastered the skill to say, hey, I'm standing here, I want to get here, and I know exactly what it takes to break that into a step-by-step formula and get myself there. The combination of those two things will absolutely give you a phenomenal life. Because the people who are just chasing the next thing, thinking it's going to finally fulfill them, hate to say it, it never will. You'll get the next person to go on a date with, it ain't going to fill you. You'll get the child you've always dreamed of, they'll piss you off. You'll get the house you always wanted, it ain't going to be what you thought it was. You'll get the job and career and money and whatever you always wanted, it ain't going to be it. You'll finally find nirvana and realize that shit ain't as cool as you thought. Whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, you have to come from a place of like, hey, I do it just because it's fun to go through the process and I like seeing what's possible.
Absolutely, man.
Be able to swap hats and be just in the moment and totally fulfilled just with what is. No matter how much you've done or where you've gone or what you've accomplished, to just be and to be totally blissed out and fulfilled by just being. Oh man, if you have that too, you could crush it. But if you just sit around and be for a while, it gets kind of hard to pay the bills.
Yeah, it's the balance. Well, there's so much amazing stuff you said there. And that's what, what I told you before we started that I really loved about how you speak in your book. It's you have to find that starting place where building the external isn't fulfilling, like that isn't necessary to fulfill you. Like you're completely at peace in any environment. And in that space that you can create whatever environment that you want also. So you're not dependent on certain things for your happiness. You found fulfillment, you found peace, and you found connection. And most people in the self-development realm or, build your business online or all that kind of stuff, they chase rabbits where they achieve success and then that wasn't it, and they achieve it and that wasn't it. So to find that space first where you are fulfilled, and it's the same thing with the book that I wrote for athletes, Zen Athlete, which is, I want the athlete to be whole and harmonious and beautiful and full of self-love, and then miss the game-winning shot, be terrible, and know that when there's, if it's LeBron James shooting the free throw to win the championship and he's sitting there and he misses, he's still complete and whole. He's not dependent on that for his self-worth. And in doing so, he's more likely to make the shot because he doesn't have that pressure. So if we can go through life in that same sense and relieve that pressure, and then move forward to what we are passionate about, what our purpose is. And I guess that would lead me into, a very important question, which is in your book, is for most people, if they're going through life, let's say they're either coming out of high school or college, or you've got a person that's in a job and they're not really living, let's say their purpose or passion, how can they start to kind of, deduce? Because I know you have so many tools, how can we start to get to a place like, okay, we found fulfillment. Now let's start to gear towards this thing. When I have it, that's not going to be my happiness. I'm happy now, but I'm going to start building and figuring out what is my purpose, what is my passion, what do I want to do?
Yeah, great question. I'll throw a thought in there to start with. So I don't know how familiar people are on here. There's a guy named Elliot Hulse, real cool guy. He's all about becoming the strongest version of yourself, and he's a physical trainer. He has a place called Strength Camp, and his whole thing is not building muscles just to look good, but it's building muscles just to be strong. And so I was talking with him, and I was asking him about mindset, just talking with him about that thought process. And one thing that was really interesting, he said there's so many young people that show up right now that want to be disattached from the moment. And he said, what's interesting, if you look at the cycles of development, it's okay to be attached at a certain stage of life. And so what's interesting is he would say with the real young ones, so just coming out of high school, and this would be a different conversation than college because it's a different stage of life. Coming out of high school, to allow yourself to pick and grid out moments of your life. If you wanted to be really advanced, like much further ahead than majority of the kids in your class, take out a calendar and literally decide, like draw lines and say, let's say from 6 a.m. when I wake up till 8 o'clock when school starts, I'm going to be totally zen, non-attached, doesn't matter. I'm just going to be present and alive. Now from 7 to 5 p.m. when it's over, I'm going to be totally attached all day. And I'm going to make it matter. I'm going to latch on to that test grade and I can't wait to get an A. And I'm going to literally lock onto that stuff. And then what's fun is when I get done and I get home, right around 5 o'clock, I'm going to set it up in my nervous system that I disattach. And I just be. And that's profound for a 75-year-old person. So if you're a 15-year-old kid and you figure that out, my gosh, you're ahead of the curve. So I'd high five you through the camera. And I speak to clients like this all the time. I had an opportunity just recently to go train with they're the parajumpers for the U.S. Special Forces Air Force. So these guys are badass beyond badass.
Yeah.
They are, they have to be able to fight like an Army Ranger or a Navy SEAL, and they have to be intelligent enough to be a physical, medical surgeon. Like that's a contrast. You normally don't get a surgeon who knows how to fight like a SEAL, and you don't normally get a SEAL who's smart enough to be a surgeon. They're really smart too, but this is like that extra cherry on top. And they're elite. They're above the rest. And so they put me through 2 days of all their training, drown proofing, threw me in the pool with them, taught me how to swim with them, all those cool things. And then I worked with them on some mindset. And what's interesting, the benefit they have that makes them elite in this specific little group, they're on mission all the time. On mission is attachment, meaning they're 100% fully attached to the end result. And in their words, I don't like this word personally, I coach people against it, but they said, listen, we deliver perfection. And I was like, perfection? Where I grew up, perfection is a low standard because it's not possible and it just becomes an excuse. And they all kind of looked at me funny. I was like, oh shit, I'm pretty sure all these guys could kill me. But anyways, I'll go on. Weird, silent, awkward moment. But we were talking through it. And when I thought in their world, because literally they get dropped in and flown in when someone has just been really injured, like limbs are lost, person is bleeding out. They have a golden hour to get them back to a hospital. They're the first person on site and they have to be able to help them or they die right now. I understand the word perfection now. You do the wrong thing by a millisecond, that person is no longer on this planet. And I was like, wow, that's intense. And so these guys are really serious and they're on mission. Their greatest strength is being so focused and attached to the outcome that nothing else matters in their world in that moment or at all. Their greatest weakness also is being fully attached all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they have families, they have friends, they have kids, they have people that they have to go home to. And the tricky part is when they go home, if they don't know how to transition back to that fulfillment side, that disattached side, they can't be present for the ones they care about. Therefore, it's as if they're not even really there. Even though their body's there, if their mind and emotions aren't there, they're not there.
Right.
And so what's tricky is how I add value to that group is by teaching them how to disassociate. And it's really weird because they're so good at associating. That's why they were handpicked to be part of this special elite force. And they brought me in to teach them how to disassociate for the moment. So the piece that I would look for in anyone listening into this, I would look for which one are you better at? Are you better at being fully associated to something to the point that you can literally black out because you're focused on it so much you forget to eat, drink water, and or breathe for long periods of time? If you're good at focusing at that level, practice non-attachment. Now, if you're really good at sitting around and blissing out for days on end and not doing anything and just being happy all the time, and it doesn't matter what happens or doesn't happen, but you always struggle paying bills and having financial success or physical success or whatever you call success that you're after, try figuring out the formula, the science to say, hey, if I want X, I can do these things, and boom, every time I do it, it gives me the result. So whatever side you're good at, practice the opposite and get good. My thought is how you grow a person, look for their weaknesses and focus on making those stronger. People disagree. They say focus on your strengths. But that thought is if you could take the weakest part of who you are and make it stronger, it really grows you as a human being. Right. So where would someone start? If you want to be fulfilled, I would start, A, by recognizing where your weakness is and really practicing rounding yourself out to give yourself the strength. How I've heard this phrase growing up is it's the art of fulfillment and the science of success. Fulfillment is an art form because it's your own unique blend of what makes life magical for you. Success is a formula. If you want to make more money, it's a step-by-step formula. Add more value, figure out where it's needed, figure out how to charge for it, replicate and duplicate, boom, you're going to have more money than you had yesterday. If you want to keep your money, figure out how to save it and invest it so it actually grows instead of spend it and let it disappear. If you want to be healthy, there's a science to that. Work out, eat healthy. That is not tricky. It's not the formula people are missing with these things. Now, what is considered healthy might be a debate nowadays, considering GMOs and all kinds of stuff. But the formulas are simple. But where I would start with people, if you're looking for a foundational piece, start by designing a day that just how you live that day is so fulfilling, you would trade it for nothing else. Meaning, where would you wake up? Who would you be with? Where would you go? How would you feel? What would you do with your time? How would you invest your life in that day? What projects would you work on? What people would you be with? What experiences would you want to be a part of? And if you could develop a day that's so fulfilling and rich from within, that literally, like someone could offer you a $100 million check and you'd be like, nope, not worth trading for it, because this day is what makes me feel alive and valuable. The type of day that you lived, you loved, and you mattered, according to a friend Brennan Burchard says. He says at the end of your life, you're going to be faced with those three questions. Did I really live? Did I really love? Did I really matter? So in the moments you were given the opportunities to do those things, did you step up and really deliver? And if you can design a day that allows you to answer yes to all three, meaning you had a chance to love someone, you poured your heart into it. You had a chance to live, you took the adventure on face on. You had a chance to matter, you made that difference that's going to last far beyond you being here physically. Now, if you can live each day like that, you've got the fulfillment part kicked in gear. Now, grab the other side, which is how do I achieve shit? And it's purely based on, like, what do I want? I want a big house? Great, I'll go get it. What do I want? I want a trip around the world? Awesome, I'll piece it together, get resourceful, and figure out the resources needed, execute, boom, I'm going. And how do you want it? Don't allow yourself to settle on this side for, well, it'd be really cool to fly first class, but I guess I should just be grateful for having a ticket anyways. It's like, no, if you really want it that way, work for it, make it that way, but don't be attached to it. And it's fun, and that's a tricky paradigm you could hear me going back and forth on. They're like, well, which is it? Do I obsess over it till I get it, or does it not really freaking matter and I can just sit in the back of the plane anyways? and it's the balance. It's the ability to jump back and forth. The ability, and I play this game all the time with myself, hanging out with guys who are like Navy SEALs or Rangers. Obviously, if they can sit on the hard metal floor for 12 hours flying around the world with a pack on their back and then jump out at midnight with a parachute on, I'm pretty sure I'll survive sitting economy class across the plane. At the same time, if my dream and vision is to be able to, without even hesitation, grab a first class ticket on a plane and go around the world, I still am going to figure out what it takes to put that puzzle together, not thinking I'm going to feel different about myself, not thinking I'll be fulfilled, purely based on the fact that, hey, I want it and I know it's possible, and if someone else was able to make it happen, so can I. I'm going to play the game and put the puzzle together and win.
Yeah, man. Well, you definitely spoke a lot of truth there, and it is a balance, right? It's a balance between two, and I think that people just sell themselves short. If you have a house and you have a job, you should be grateful. You should wake up and be excited and fulfilled, and then realize that you can really actually create anything that you want. And that's the joy of living, is in the decision of what will fulfill you. What, if you were infinite, if you could do anything, what is it? And believe in yourself that you can create those things. But it isn't the things that's going to, give you fulfillment. It's just that you're here, you're a creator. So let's go back and forth and enjoy building whatever your unique expression of you is. And we all have that power. So I guess
one big question is, people will ask, well, what order do you go? Because if you try to do two things at once, it slows you down and it takes your ability to perform away, which is true. So if you try to multitask, you're going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and make very little progress in either one. So if you had to pick an order, a lot of people would say, and this is the illusion, well, I'm going to put success first, because if I can just achieve all these things, then I'll have the space to go learn about that fulfillment shit and be really happy. The challenge is it's a never-ending, black hole, because no matter how much you get, there's always more. You're like, hey, I worked really hard and I got this awesome car, but there's a faster one. There's a new edition. There's a new model. I worked really hard and I took that trip I always wanted, but I saw some dude who pulled up in a private jet instead of first class. I'm like, but there's always something more significant or more special or bigger than you thought that you try to get to. So I would do the reverse. I would go for fulfillment first. If you figure out how to set up your life so that every day you wake up and just by living, you feel fulfilled, alive, and just full as a human being, abundant. Now you're good. Now from this place, use that as your platform to go to the moon and back 10 times if you feel like it. But from a place where, like you said, you're absolutely abundant, you're absolutely fulfilled. You know that who you are as a human being, just breathing and being and existing, is more than enough. And that's all you ever need to be, is just yourself. Now, once you can nail that down, now go.
Yeah, that's the truth, man. I love it. I definitely agree 100%. So you've worked with a lot of people, elite. I can't even imagine, working with the military guys. Like, those guys must be nuts. Make me look like the snowboarders that can do double backflips or whatever, nothing, just next level human beings. What do you find, maybe some belief systems, because I know you know a lot about belief systems, would be common ones that would prevent somebody from even seeing it? For me, when I talk to a lot of people, is they've never asked themselves the question, what do I really want? And then they're in this belief system where they don't believe that they can have more. It's they hit a ceiling, and wherever that ceiling is, that's where they are. If it's, a job that's 50 grand a year, that's the ceiling. If it's 100 grand that they get there, then that's the ceiling. So do you have any tools or tips for, common belief systems or beliefs that people might have and they're not even aware of, and to just break those and be oh, okay, it is okay to have more. And, I can start looking that way and shining the light towards what I want. Because if you never look, it's never going to happen.
Sure. The simplest way to start is just taking your temperature gauge and figure out where your current thermometer is set. And this could be anything. This could be in your relationship. This could be in your health. This could be in your emotions. But it's combing through your life in an area that really matters to you, that you want to see progress in, and just asking yourself, where's my comfort zone? Where's my temperature gauge set at? And what I mean by a temperature gauge, if you go in a house, the thermostat, if I set the thermostat in our home here to 75 degrees, it doesn't stay 75 degrees perfectly every single day, every hour of the day. What happens is it'll let's say it's cold outside, so the temperature will slowly drop until it gets to like 68 degrees, and then that's the bottom limit of the temperature gauge. It'll kick the heat on, and the heat will start warming up the house, and it'll get warmer, and it doesn't stop perfectly at 75. It goes all the way up to like 78, and then it goes, oh, that's too hot according to this temperature setting. So now the air conditioning comes on, and it pulls it down, and it doesn't stop at 75. It drops all the way back down to 68, and it goes, oh shoot, now it's too cold. Okay, kick it back on. And all day it goes back and forth to try to keep the house right where I wanted it at 75. And that's what it does. So here's what's interesting. Let's look at someone's health. Where are they comfortable living? And let's say there's a young guy out there who's always wanted to sculpt his body. He's always wanted to run faster than he's ever ran, or lift more than he's ever lifted. And let's use a simple expression. So his goal is to bench press, let's say 315 pounds, so 3 plates. And he's all excited. And he's like, I've always wanted to get there. And he starts working out, and he's real comfortable at 225. So he throws 2 plates on there. He can move that up and down, no problem. He's got it 20 times, golden. Now, if you can do 225 20 times, I guarantee you can do 315. Except right here, it ain't clicking. And someone can be like, no, there's muscle fiber and strength and all this stuff. I guarantee if you can do it by yourself with no struggle, 225 20 times effortlessly, guarantee 315 is no big deal at least once. Except for it's all in your mind. Because you have a temperature zone that says, hey, 225, perfect. Anything below there, easy, like no effort at all. Now, anything above there, you only go up so far, and then your mind goes, oh shit, that's too heavy, I can't do it, and it brings you right back to 225 comfortably. Let's take this into your finances. You say you're set at 50,000 a year. You're golden. 50,000 a year, anything right there is good. You drop down to like 42 and you go, it's not enough, and you start working your ass off until you hit 50, but you don't stop at 50. You get up to like 55 and you're like, I'm rich, and you start blowing money like crazy. And it's like, wow, that temperature gauge is going to keep you right around the same exact number every year, again and again and again and again and again. This happens in real estate agents all the time. They have this big goal. They go out, they close a couple of huge properties, they get a huge check, and all of a sudden they're at their goal, and it's only February, and they start slacking off for the next 6 months until they start spending too much money, and right around October they go, oh, I'm out of money, and they go nuts trying to make money again, and they make a huge amount, and they go through this weird cycle. And so this thought process becomes, where's your temperature gauge set in whatever area of your life matters to you most? This happens in relationships a lot too. My temperature gauge is set being in like a friends with maybe some benefits mode. I'm not really ready to get married. That's like outside of my zone. And I don't want to just like hook up with someone all the time. I need connection. And so it's this weird little area that I go back and forth between like finding the person, getting really connected, starts to get too serious. I freak out and run away and end it. Then I go back to like single, just hooking up with random people. I'm like, that's not fulfilling anymore. So I start to go, and then you run the same cycle. I was like, wow, when are you going to reset the temperature gauge? When are you going to step back and say, okay, first off, let's identify the temperature. What am I set at? What's my maximum area I'm comfortable with before I freak out and do something weird? And what's the minimum that if it gets that low, literally my nervous system goes haywire and I'm like, I got to work or got to make it different. And what are those temperatures in whatever category of life? Now, once you figure out what those are, now you got to figure out why are they there and what has to happen to reset them. And so simple question, what would I actually want it to be? Now, if your temperature gauge, if you really want to be up at 315 on that bench press, what would you have to believe about yourself? What would you have to believe about your body? What would you have to believe about your muscles? What would you have to believe about lifting 315 pounds? What would your identity have to become as a human being to be able to feel comfortable doing that? And you'll start to realize there's a lot of stuff going on the internal side of a human being where it might be like, hey, I had one friend who made fun of me in high school and told me I would never be able to do this. And if I did, I'd be weird. And so I've always let that keep me from doing it. And it's like, how strange. Sounds silly, but it happens. The little thoughts like that seep in. And, all of a sudden, if you turn that thought around and get rid of it, just replace it. So, I'm the type of guy or I'm the type of gal who can do this. And I will do this. And it's possible. And I'm going to enjoy it. And when I do it, I'm just going to love every moment of it. I'm going to do it not to try to prove anyone wrong, just purely because I know it's possible. And then start visualizing every day yourself doing it over and over and over again. It always starts in the mind. Start practicing, not only visualizing it, but mentally rehearsing it, where you see yourself lift the weight. You feel the pressure. You feel comfortable, a little bit tense as it comes down. You feel really strong and breathe it out as it goes up. You see yourself sitting up and like, yes, I did it. And as you start rehearsing it and mentally preparing and emotionally preparing, do it so many times in your head where it feels like second nature. It feels like it actually happened. Where literally you would think back and go, well, I'm pretty sure it happened because I've done it so many times in my head. It literally feels real. Now at that point, check in and see where your temperature gauge is set. Normally it'll go up a bit. And if you keep doing that same pattern again, checking in, rehearsing, practicing in your mind, physically getting the motions set, pretty soon you'll be at a place where you'll go right past it. And you'll be, benching 385 and be like, whoa, look at this. And you're stronger than you ever imagined. Same thing in finances. If you keep practicing it and realizing what it takes to get there and practicing feeling more comfortable at a higher level, pretty soon you'll reset that standard and blow right through it. Simple story around finances. I remember when I was in college, my temperature gauge was $5,000. Whenever I had $5,000 in my bank account, I felt rich and I would start blowing money, which it's a lot back then, but it's not a whole ton of money. But it was enough that if that amount was in my bank account, I felt rich enough to take trips, go try stuff, go on fancy dates. I'd come up with all kinds of ways to spend money. And it was silly. Luckily, I wasn't into buying a bunch of stuff, but I would just find adventures to go on that I'd blow a bunch of money. And then I'd look at the bank account, it'd be down to $500. And I'd go and start working like crazy again to fill it back up. And I found out my range was like 500 to 5,000. The day I sat down and redid that, I had to reset it. I had to visualize it. I had to practice daily. I had to get very comfortable, having large amounts. And nowadays we keep really large amounts in our bank account, cash liquid, just, as a nest egg. And every time we get to a certain level that's far beyond what we're comfortable with, we have to reset the gauge and grow it again. And it's the same process every time you want to grow.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think you can, like you were saying, you can use that in all areas of your life. First of all, identifying, where you are. And most people don't think about that. So you can take relationships, health, finances, business, career. How much passion do you want in your job? How much passion do you want in your life? And you set that comfort bar. And then by analyzing it, and when you're talking about visualization, it's so powerful. When we talk about the Navy SEALs, when I do sports psychology for snowboarders, we have a level of necessity. So if you can do one backflip and you want to do two backflips, well, there's a high level of risk where if you're playing a traditional sport, and you miss a pass or something, you're generally okay. Where we have to be on point. And so if they want to go from two backflips even to three backflips now it's up to four. It's ridiculous. You've got to visualize it over and over and over again. And if you do it enough, you're going to know. You will just know that you can land it. And that's how the mind works. It's the same way if you close your eyes and you imagine a big juicy lemon and you take a bite and you have a physical reaction. It's the same thing being sent to the universe. So you're resetting your bar and not being attached to it, visualizing it every day. So you're experiencing it, you're living, you're sending out that signal, and you're retraining yourself on where you want to go. So it's very simple. And it's pretty much the same process I would say most successful people have used to do almost anything. And they're not special. They didn't have more resources. They didn't, there was nothing different. We all have this ability. It's just where we want to set our bar. And if we can, believe it in ourselves that we are a lot of the time worth it. Like we deserve it. And we all do.
Yep, absolutely. And that's part of that temperature gauge. If your temperature gauge is set low because of you don't feel you're worthy of achieving the other side, that's part of the belief system. You got to dig in. And the simplest way to turn around any belief is with action. If you identify something where it's like, oh, I can't do 3 backflips, prove yourself wrong. Now there's some instances like that where I think muscle motor memory will probably be useful. So for the one guy listening who's like, okay, screw you guys, I'm gonna go do 4 backflips. I've never done one in my life. Like, don't do that. You're gonna hurt yourself. You're gonna need a little practice, and probably to hire someone like you to give them some training on how to do their first one so they understand the motor movement necessary to do it. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying you're taking a lot of risk if you're going to go throw yourself randomly. Same thing. You know, a kid could wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm going to win a gold medal in the Olympic sprinting competition. It's like, well, if you've never sprinted in your life, you better start practicing, because it takes some motor movement to get your body to move that way quickly. And it doesn't mean you're not talented. But at that level, it usually takes more than just talent, because there's a lot of talented people who can run real fast who don't stand a chance because they don't practice enough and they haven't built their body to actually function in that capacity, in that way, for that distance at that intensity. And so the same thing, if you want to use sports as an analogy, you wrap that back around and say, hey, if I want to grow my business, what functional things do I have to do consistently at what capacity for how long at what intensity? And it's like, wow, you know, if you want to grow a sales business, you're going to have to learn how to do a bunch of sales calls at a very high intensity, at a very consistent level, over and over and over and over and over again. If you're able to do that consistently, you will crush it in a sales job. And it's just learning how to run a race, you know, 1 foot after the next, 1 call after the next, the same exact thing. The formula, and this is, you know, we train performance coaches now. The formula of how to get someone to excel in anything is really close and very similar across just about every space and field in life. To get a business person to perform, to get an athlete to perform, to get a parent to perform, to get a student to perform, the fundamentals stay the fundamentals across the board. It's getting them to lock in and figuring out what it takes uniquely for them to enjoy the process, them to love the process, and them to really fall in love with getting themselves to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And again, this is the science of success side. So this is when we set those goals and we figure out, hey, there's a very specific set of steps to get you there. How do we get you to fall in love with that so it feels normal and natural, and actually you look forward to it every day? And at that point, now we've blended the two to the point that they're in love with the process that's actually getting them the results they're really after. One other tricky thing that happens is there's a lot of people out there who they say they want something, but they're afraid of it. You know, they tell themselves like, wow, I really want to do 4 backflips. But in their mind, they're like, oh my God, if I did 4 backflips, that's more backflips than my dad ever did. And I don't know if I'm ready for that, because then our relationship's going to get weird. And it's more backflips than my best friend Tom used to do. And then he's going to be weird. And so they start creating all these fake stories in their mind of what might happen if they pull it off, that they scare themselves out of even trying. And so it's interesting. A nice conversation point to have is, what's the difference between faith and fear? You know, because if you sat down and thought about doing 4 backflips and you had faith that it was going to work out, all you do in your mind is see a fake representation of the future happening in your mind that's not real. You're making it up, all of it. And you're just projecting into the future this hopeful thing that'll happen, that'll be what you want it to be. But you're focusing on what you actually want to have happen. Now, what's the difference between that and fear? Fear is also a fake projection of reality into the future. It's made up in your head. It is not real. It has not happened yet. You're projecting all the things you don't want to have happen into the future and seeing those unfold before you. And really, truly, where you choose to focus is completely up to you and how you train your mind. And how to control that comes down to the question you ask yourself continuously. So, you know, if you sit there thinking about doing 4 backflips and you ask yourself the question immediately, what could go wrong? I guarantee you're going to find a whole lot of shit and scare the shit out of yourself. And that's the question some people ask every day. They wake up and they're like, okay, I'm excited about today. What could go wrong? Oh my God, oh this or this or this. And they freak themselves out and don't feel like leaving the house. And they wonder why they feel paralyzed every day, because that's the question they ask. Versus some people wake up and they're in crazy ass situations, like crazy, crazy situations. And they ask themselves a different question. How do I make this work?
Right.
And they feel fine. And it's like, how in the heck can you be being shot at? Can stuff be blowing up around you? Can you be in a crazy intense situation where you're watching people lose their limbs and you're running over to help them and you feel totally fine? It's like, wow, because they asked themselves the question, how do I make this work? and that's all they're focused on. Therefore, they don't even see all the chaos around them. They don't see all the stuff. They're zoned in. They use what's called their mental spotlight to shine light on specifically the things they want to focus on and feel. Therefore, that's all they experience. There was a study done for burn victims where it's the most painful thing that could happen to you, and when they have to clean the wound is the most painful part. And so what happened is they tried using all kinds of like morphine and drugs and stuff to numb the pain while they do it, and pain levels are still off the chart. It's horribly painful. They tried using a virtual reality video game that took up the person's mental spotlight, meaning it was a game that required a lot of mental thought and focus, and it's in virtual reality, so it takes them physically to a different space where they can look around and feel like they're in a whole different world. And what happened is they figured out when they can take up the entire person's mental spotlight and focus, meaning there's so many things happening they have to focus really intensely on, what happens is the pain completely goes away because they can't focus on it. And so they get better physical numbing effects on the body through taking up the mental spotlight and focusing on something really intensely than they do giving the person like morphine and high-level drugs.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what's interesting is just throwing it out there for people listening in real quick. What you choose to focus on all day is determining how you feel, period. If you feel defeated, if you feel frustrated, if you feel like you can't make it forward, it's purely based on what you're focusing on. If you want to change your focus, ask a better question. Instead of what's wrong with today, ask what's right with today. And you have to literally like pound this question every day continuously by practicing it again and again and again until it becomes the question you ask all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. We get the choice of perspective. We don't always get to choose what happens, but so if we always ask like, so what do I want, or what's the most powerful and positive perspective that I can have in this situation, we can then shine the light there, because you're going to go from victim to creator. And a lot of people have challenging situations. So that becomes our choice, and that becomes our empowerment to have that. You said a lot of amazing stuff there. And when you talked about faith or fear, I like using the example of it's either love or fear. And I think that we live in a loving, harmonious universe, and we can create that for ourselves. And if we love ourselves and we want to spread love and just kind of connect to the things that we find bliss and joy in, we can create that. And that is harmony for us. And what prevents us is the fear of asking the right questions, fear of being bigger than we are, fear of all this mental illusion baggage that we have. And we don't move forward, but we don't address it because we have this network we've never really looked at. And if you analyze it and you realize it is a lot of fear, you can step into love. And in love is creation. And all that fear of, not landing the backflip or, your friends or whatever, it's all nonsense. It's all illusionary, but it has a very real effect on your reality. So by coming into that place of love, I think that, we can do amazing things. But I want to respect your time. I know that you've got a lot of things to do. I appreciate everything that you've done. I thank you for hanging out with me and sharing your wisdom. And to everybody out there, make sure you grab his book. It is amazing. Follow him on Twitter. Check out his website. He's got all sorts of amazing stuff there. So if you want a balanced and whole and fulfilling life, definitely check out his work, because it's going to give you the super shot to get there quickly and easily with real tools and strategies to figure out what you want and then go and get it. So Jairek, thanks so much for your time, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Bye, guys. Thanks for watching.